How's it going, guys? So, for those of you who haven't watched the JP livestream nor the Twitter, X notifications, we are getting a new limited banner on the 30th of April. So, even though the livestream happened like a few days ago, I'm releasing this video now. Like, it's a bit late, I know, but it's mainly because I've been spending my time thinking about how I should recommend this banner to you guys, either like you should pull or not and whatnot. And I went through a lot of like situations and a lot of the things that we're going to go through, a lot of events, a lot of content, and I finally made up my mind, and now is the time to make this video. It's definitely not because I've been wasting a lot of time playing other games. Definitely not. You guys should 100% trust me on that. Like, actually. Yep. So that being said, I think it's time to give you guys a short summary of what I've been thinking about and should you pull this banner or not. And the short answer is you should still pull this banner despite it not being the most game-changing banner, and despite the fact that we have like several really meta OP operators coming our way, you should still pull this banner. And I'll go into deeper why that is the case. And let's begin with our first operator. And for our first operator, let's talk about Viviana, because she has a special place in my heart. We first saw her in like, I think over a year ago at this point, and I really fell in love with her general like art design and whatnot. She appeared in it as an enemy, right? Remember? And like, I still really like her in terms of like the design, and I think there is something within her kit that makes her usable. It's just that in the end, we just haven't gotten a single chance for her to really shine. So Viviana is a arts fighter, so just like Surtur. I think you guys already see where this is going, but let's continue. Her first talent is that she deals 8% more arts damage, and she takes 8% less physical and arts damage. That goes to 9% if she has pot 5. And the effect is doubled if there is a elite or boss enemy within her attack range. So you can go up to 18% of physical and arts damage reduction. Beware, this is not Sanctuary. This is a completely separate effect. So if you have Sanctuary stacked on her, the effects do stack. Now, her second talent is that whenever she attacks a elite or boss enemy, there's a 20% chance, or 22% if you are pot 3 like me, chance to get a shield that can block melee attack. And you can stack up to 1 layer. So the whole melee attack thing is really hard to tell, because like you instinctively tell, like instinct tells you that those that are like, you know, projectile based are range attacks, but sometimes that's not the case. And like you would say, oh, if they're just using their hand to hit you, that's most likely going to be a melee attack, but sometimes that's also not true. It's super complicated, and like you have to go through case by case and just test it out yourself. So yeah, that is something that you will have to be aware if the whole melee attack is actually a thing, like, or not. But mostly if it doesn't have a projectile, you can count that as a melee attack, just not 100%. So her first skill is that she will attack, her next attack will have increased attack to 200%, up to 200%, and attack twice. If you charge it twice, so for 4 SP, you can charge it twice, which costs 8 SP, and she can't attack anyone else because this is auto triggered. The attack range is increased by 2, and she hits 3 times. So this is the only AFK skill that you're going to use with her, basically. And not gonna lie, it's not that strong. Even as an AFK skill, there are better choices. And the biggest thing about with AFK strategies is that you usually want operators that can at least provide a few blocks or hit 2 at least, like Mountain, block 2, hit 2, right? Blaze, block 3, hit 3. You want these operators that can block and hit multiple enemies at once. And unless you're at this very specific stage where, okay, there is only this one enemy at a time coming through with this one lane, then you can probably use her. But don't forget, she doesn't have any healing as well. So then you'll also need a medic on her. It's going to be a bit of a mess. So that's probably why I just never bothered using this skill, because like there's really no use case for me. Now, skill 2. And this is going to start sounding familiar. So for skill 2, once you activate the skill, she will have increased attack by 40%, increased defense by 160%. So that is really high defense. She will have +1 block count, and she can attack all enemies that she's blocking. So that means block 2, hit 2. Every time she attacks, there's an up to 20% chance to make the attack a double hit with 150% of her attack and steal 40 attack speed from the enemy. She can have gain plus 40 attack speed, but the enemy can have their attack speed keep going down. And this can be really strong, because if you can get that steal on the first hit, you're going to get so much attack speed that the overall damage, the total damage of this skill just like greatly increases. But you also have to account for the fact that it's not always going to be like the steal on the first hit. It's 20% chance, so like you're expecting like 4 to 5 hits for her to steal, so it's not really gonna happen, to be honest. And this attack speed will last until the skill ends or when Viviana leaves the field. So in general, this skill reminds me of Astasia. And I don't know how many of you remembers Astasia, because she's like basically year 1 operator, right? She was really early. We used her in CC beta. And at this point in the game right now, having an operator that basically behaves like a year 1 operator, but a tiny bit better, it's not enough. It's really not enough. And also the block 2 hit to kind of not enough as well in this day and age, because like remember how like let's say in chapter 13 we just had, right, there's always like a huge bunch of enemies coming at once. Like even Mountain isn't doing so well, and he has block 2 hit through all the time, while Viviana doesn't have that. She doesn't. It's only within the 35-second skill duration at M3, and it's a 25-second cooldown, so it's like a total of 60 seconds to rotate, and then 35 seconds of that is actually skill uptime. It's really not enough. The benefit of this skill is that she will have really high defense, because as you can tell, she already has quite the high defense even within the guard sections, and also high HP as well. So having the extra defense does allow her to tank a bit, but it's also overshined by her skill 3, because you're really going to be focusing using her against like elite enemies and bosses, especially within 1v1 situations, because of her talent 2 that can generate shield for her. So yeah, also not a skill that I would recommend anyone to M3. Now, skill 3. As you can tell, this is the only skill that I would like anywhere recommend M3ing, and the skill effect is as so. Her attack interval will be increased by 0.5 seconds, which makes her attack interval to 1.75 seconds. And she will have increased up to 110% attack, increased up to 90% defense, and plus 25 resistance. Attack turns into double hit, and the chance of triggering her second talent is increased to 2.5 times. So 50% or 55% if you're pot 3. And she will prioritize elite or boss enemies. Now that's the first time you use it, right? So you're gonna go in, wait 7 seconds, activate the skill. It's gonna last 15 seconds, and then you're gonna go wait another 25 seconds and use it the second time. And from second time onwards, she will have +2 attack range, and attack becomes triple hit, and the duration becomes 25 seconds. So that is way better. But what that also means is that you can't use her like a Surtur, where you just drop her down, wait 5 seconds, activate skill, destroy everything, right? You got to keep her on the field, keep her alive, like let's say in front of a defender or side of a defender, and then just like be able to deal damage for free is basically what you want to do with her if you want her, like really let her do her job. and that's tanking them, especially like in front of other operators, because you want her to be tanking the boss. That's the only way you're gonna get benefit out of her talent too. And the fact is that even then, you also want a defender behind of her because of how the nature of like recent stages are, where they just like spawn a bunch of enemies all at once. So she only blocks one, right? So you need other defenders or like other operators to block behind her. And then you also need to give her a medic, because if you really don't give her a medic, well, even though there's a chance for a shield, and it's like not a low chance, it's like 50%, and then you can double hit, so that's like a 70%, 75% chance every time she attacks. Even then, you still need a medic on her just in case, because a lot of bosses hit like really frequently, and they also stunned because she won't generate shield if she's stunned, all that situation. So there's a lot of things that can happen, and most of the time you just still need a medic on her. And here's the thing, we have Surtur, and we know how broken Surtur is, right? Especially if you're just like, okay, I just want to plonk her down and then just start stabbing at the boss. Surtur's just doing a way better job at that. Not saying that Viviana doesn't have any like strength for her, because she does do really well with her shield against like those like hard single hitting bosses, but that's really it. And then the other thing I would say is that Surtur has penetrating resistance. Viviana doesn't. So if the boss has like 50 resistance, Viviana is not going to do much. So that's probably the reason that I didn't want to recommend Viviana. And like back when she was released in CN, we all had hopes, right? Because it's Viviana. We all liked her. But still, like after 6 months, she never shined in a single situation, and she's also not she's also in the permanent banner, so like you might just get her off banner someday. So if I would say is, if you don't get her, don't be too mad about it, because she's not really that good, and you can just wait to get her off banner someday. So that's Viviana. And then there's our limited operator, Virtuosa, or how you guys like to call her, Artoria, which is not actually her name. But either ways, this is a really hard operator. This is the hardest operator to recommend to you guys. And like I'm not saying you shouldn't put. In fact, she is the only operator that you should be pulling in this banner. But it's really hard to come up with the conclusion that you should be pulling her. So we'll have to go through like in a lot of details when it comes to her. So first of all, before we talk about all her talent and her skills, and before how we talk about I actually M9 her, she is a ritualist, which probably 90% of you would not even know what it is, because we only recently just got her with a similar archetype in IS4, the free operator, Velargvina. Is that how you pronounce her name? I have no idea, but you get the idea. And the whole thing about this archetype is that they deal elemental damage, and that is necrosis. And we'll have to talk about necrosis first, because it's basically the main effect, like the main kit with this operator, with these operators. So necrosis is a damage where enemy will have a life bar of like an elemental bar of 1,000. If it's a boss, it's 2,000, but that's only for bosses. And whenever she deals attack, there's a certain amount of her damage that will be converted, that will be extra dealt to the elemental damage bar. And when the bar is gone, so if you deal enough damage, 1,000 or 2,000 towards the boss, enemy will lose 50% of their attack for 15 seconds, but it will gradually recover. So at the start of the 15 seconds is 50, at the end it's like closer to 0, and then at 15 seconds gone, it's 0. And they will also take 800 elemental damage attack for every second. So this will total to 12,000 damage. And because there is no resistance against this elemental damage attack, it's basically true damage. So you can think of this as a operator that can remove enemy, like deal 12,000 damage after a long period of time, depending on if you use her skill or not. And the decreased attack will also boost your survivability, obviously. So let's take a look at her first talent. Her first talent is that for all enemies within her attack area, they will take 10% of her attack as this necrosis damage and slow them for 0.2 seconds. And because slow is decreased movement speed by 80%, and it's a once every second thing for 0.2 seconds, it's not like a significant amount of slow, but it's actually better than you think when it comes to the actual feel. It does dramatically feel like she's getting more chance to deal the elemental damage towards the enemies. Her second talent is that if the enemy, all the enemy within her attack area will take 20% or 22% if you're at pod 5 more necrosis damage. And this works, this basically defines Virtuosa, right? It's all about dealing those elemental damages. So let's take a look at her skill. Her first skill is an auto-active skill. So this is the kind of skill that you can actually just use to AFK. So this skill will only attack enemies that does not attack enemies that have their elemental damage, elemental bar depleted. So it's if they're not taking the 800 attack per second thing, then she will only attack those. If their elemental shield is bursted, she will not attack them, and she will attack them by 300% of her art attack and bring 110% of her attack as necrosis damage. And because she already has over 500 attack herself, you can kind of see this as a 2 charge hit to deplete enemies' elemental damage bar. But don't forget that you also have to account for her talent. So usually if there's like a lot of small enemies, like a few, like if there's really a lot, she's not going to deal with all of them. But like if there's a few that's already in her attack range, the first one might take 2 charges, but the second one and the third one might only take 1 charge if they're not a boss, assuming. So it's actually better than you think in terms of how frequently she's dealing these attacks. And it's actually a pretty good skill because, as you can see, you start off with 18 SP and you can only charge the skill 3 times, right? So you're basically deployed with 3 charges from the beginning. So it's actually not that, it doesn't take that long to just get your first shot out. So it actually feels pretty good to use in a lot of AFK situations where you just want a bit of survivability, a bit of support, a bit of extra damage, and a bit of slow on the field all the time. You just bring this and you pop her down and you just forget about her. So this is actually a pretty interesting feeling skill, especially if you were playing IS. Highly recommend this skill because it does solve a few stages just because of her habit of not attacking those that's already got their elemental shield bursted. So let's talk about her skill 2, because I think this is one of the more interesting one, even though not the most powerful looking one at first glance. So during her second skill, she will have plus 60 attack speed and attack 2 targets at the same time. So she would attack an extra target, and she herself and the another operator within her attack area that has the highest attack will deal 25% of her attack as necrosis damage. So an interesting way that I saw people use this is if you pair her with Scotty Alter skill 3, you can put her down and then activate skill 2, and you can use Scotty Alter skill 3 elsewhere with the summon, right? And that will deal necrosis damage throughout the entire map. That is actually really powerful in my opinion. And I once thought of pairing her with Minar, but I thought of it and it's well, Minar already deals so much damage. I really don't need 12,000 extra true damage, quote unquote. So yeah, it's better if you pair her with other operators that has interesting range, say Golden Glow, who just attacks on the whole field. Those operators, or those that can hit plenty at once and have a longer reach, like a larger attacker, those usually work really well in my opinion. So yeah, it's an interesting skill where like you can get different effects by like what operator you pair with. So there's a lot of fun that you can have with this skill. That's basically it. Just have fun with it. So I would actually recommend M3 this as well because it's so much fun. Now, skill 3. This is the best skill for Virtuosa in my opinion, and like she's already showed it in the most recent CNCC as well, so you know that if you're a CC player, you definitely want her. So the effect of skill 3 is that she will stop attacking, but have her attack area increase. The attack area is the same as Suzuran's skill 3, and she will have plus 180% attack. The effect of her second talent, which is the attack increased necrosis attack thing, is increased by increased to 2.5 times. So you'll get 50% of her attack as necrosis damage. And within the skill duration and operators within her attack area, the operator with the highest HP will have their HP increased by 30%. The operator with the highest attack will have their attack increased by 30%, and have the operator with the highest defense will have their defense increased by 30%. The buff part of like the 30% buff, I think isn't really that relevant because like the 30% increased attack isn't actually that big of a deal most of the time. Because like you can have way more attack buffs on other operators, and like this skill lasts for 40 seconds, right? A lot of other operators' skill just ends with like 30 seconds, 15 seconds. There's a skill, Typhon skill 3 does work with this, or if you want you can go Hoderer, but like, you know, that's really rare if you want to get those attack buffs. And the survivability buff is also like negligible because remember how I mentioned that her necrosis effect just decrease enemies attack by 50%? That kind of already does the job for like offering your operator survivability. So the increased HP and increased defense isn't really that big of a deal. But what this skill provides is AoE trash mob clear. No mob will survive within this area for 40 seconds straight. All of them will die, right? The downside of this skill is the 60-second cooldown. But if you guys remember, there is this operator called Suzuran with this module where supporters will get increased SP. So technically speaking, you can go Virtuosa skill 3, Suzuran skill 3, Virtuosa skill 3, Suzuran skill 3. You can keep rotating that. So that's an interesting way to use this skill. And if you were watching the CC strategies, yeah, she works really well. Now you know the skills. Why is she a must pull for me? Like this, even if you're not a CC player. Okay, but I should talk about CC first because like CC is probably the biggest reason why you should pull. So in CC, we get a lot of decreased attack tags. But remember how she does elemental damage and the necrosis damage, like burst effect, is actually just true damage. So she doesn't really take too much effect. She's not too much affected by the increased defense, decrease attack kind of tag from CC. That makes her just really good because even though there are times like enemy will get increased HP, it's usually not enough to tank the full 12,000 HP that they're taking with as true damage. So yeah, this basically makes her shine the most in CC, especially the highest difficulty, the highest risk CC. But other content is where she's also really good. So first of all, my favorite, IS. In IS 4, she is a really good starter for supported defender squads because her skill, all three of her skills works pretty well in IS 4. And even though her total damage does fall off within the later floors, just the decrease attack on enemy and then the increased attack on an operator also makes her kind of like a debuffer and a buffer for your operator. So even though like technically speaking the 12,000 damage isn't really enough, she still has a role in the later floors, unlike Jessica Alter where she kind of just becomes a stun bombshell in the later floors and her other skills just doesn't do much and her tanking capability isn't quite there. So like Virtuosa, in my opinion, is the superior defender supporter squad starter. And When it comes to SSS though, SSS enemies has really high HP and her 12,000 total damage isn't quite enough. So don't even think about her in SSS unless you just want her to, you know, get yourself more rotation, and then you can probably pick her up in the way. But yeah, who cares about SSS anyway? I don't play that thing. I do sometimes, but like mostly I don't bother with it. And with your daily content, which is I think what most people should care about, what you're getting is not just another slower. What you're getting is a new type of operator that can ignore resistance, mostly can ignore defense. And like, sure, we haven't really had a single situation where like she's super OP that she solves the entire mechanic. But don't forget, there is also another archetype, another caster archetype that can deal extra damage towards those enemies that have their elemental shield broken. And once we get a 6-star variant of that, well, it's time for Virtuosa to shine. And I know we've been saying that for CN ever since her release, but trust me, it's not copium. It will happen someday. It's just not yet, okay? So even for that future, I think you should always just pick her up and then wait for that day. And then for now, right, you can still use her, like I said, Suzuran Virtuosa combo and just repeat their skills. And it's still a pretty good combo. Like you can use Virtuosa to deal all the damage, and then while Suzuran is also on her skills, you can buff other operators to deal more damage with other operators like Minar, you know, they also work pretty well. So that is basically it for this banner. If you need a recap, it's basically get Virtuosa, and if you don't get Viviana, don't be sad about it. And best case scenario, you get Virtuosa with the free temple, and then you just run, and then you save all your pulls for later, like really OP banners that are coming down the way. That's it for this video. I hope you guys all get lucky pulls on this banner, and I will see you guys tomorrow for me when I'm live streaming the CN anniversary live stream on Twitch. So I'll see you guys there. Bye.